3 nights later, I stood where he told me I did not exist. The watch floor was quiet at 0300. Half the overhead lights were off. The screens threw a pale blue over the consoles, and the air handlers hummed the way they always had, low and steady, a sound I had slept to when I was 19. On the access board by the hatch, one badge slot was dark. Deactivated. A small black square where a man's whole career used to light up green. I signed the endorsement on the review. My name went on the line. Corinne Vale, Commander, United States Navy. The pen did not shake. I had thought it might. There was no pleasure in it. I want to be clear about that because a lot of people think there would be. They imagine you savor the moment the man who threw you out gets thrown out himself. You do not. Or I did not. I stood there with the paper in my hand and felt only the weight of a thing done correctly, which is a heavier weight than most people expect. Then I turned off the last light I was allowed to turn off, and I let myself remember how it had started. It had started 3 days before, at 1930, with a chief standing in a hatch and telling me I was nobody. I had come aboard that afternoon. Service khakis, a garment bag, a folder under my arm. I was reporting as the incoming commanding officer of the command, and I had walked onto that quarterdeck with the particular calm of a person coming home to a house she used to clean. Because I had. 20 years before, I had stood the mid-watch on that exact floor as a cryptologic technician 3rd class. I had mopped that deck. I had carried coffee to men who did not learn my name for a year. I knew the building the way you know a place that raised you and did not thank you for growing up. My command badge was not ready. That is a small, boring truth that sits at the center of this whole story. Badges are issued locally. There is a process. Fingerprints, a photo, a system that talks to another system, and 24 to 48 hours of a clerk being busy. I had a temporary visitor pass on a lanyard and a folder full of the command I was about to take. I did not have to walk the floor that night. I chose to. I wanted to see it honest. I wanted to see how the watch ran when nobody on it knew that the woman by the hatch would be reading their orders in the morning. You learn more about a command in the first hour nobody knows you than in a year of quarterdeck salutes. That is not cynicism. That is just true, and every good leader I ever had knew it. So I went down the passageway, past the cipher locks I still knew the feel of, to the hatch of the main watch floor. And a chief stepped into it. He was broad and squared away, a chief cryptologic technician with the kind of posture that tells you a man has decided his uniform is his personality. His name tape read, Cole, Barrett Cole, though I did not know the first name yet. He looked at my visitor pass. He looked at my face. He decided. You don't have a badge, he said. Loud, not to me, to the floor. So you don't exist in my space. Out. Behind him, a second-class petty officer laughed. A short laugh, caught behind the back of his hand, the laugh of a young man who thinks the powerful person in the room is the one doing the talking. His name was Prewitt. I would learn that too. I looked at the chief for 1 second, maybe 2. I had stood that exact watch at 19. I knew the rule he was hiding behind better than he did. The rule is real. No badge, no unescorted access, no exceptions, and a chief who enforces it is doing his job. But there is a way to turn a person away that protects the space, and there is a way that performs for the room, and he had chosen the second one. He had chosen the audience. I picked up my folder. I said, "Understood, Chief," and I left. The hatch sealed behind me with the soft, heavy sound those hatches make. I stood in the passageway for a moment and let it. I did not knock. I did not explain. I did not reach for the one card that would have wiped the look off his face, because I had a folder under my arm that already held the thing that would undo him, and I had no intention of using it as a weapon. I want you to understand who was standing in that passageway, because he did not. A commander in the United States Navy, 23 years of service. A woman who had gone in at 18 with a duffel bag and a chip on her shoulder and come up the hard way, enlisted first, commissioned later, the long road they call the Mustang Road. I had stood mid-watches on 3 continents. I had run collection floors during nights I am still not allowed to describe. I had signed for spaces that do not appear on maps, and I had mopped that particular deck at 19, while a chief, very much like Barrett Cole, told me to stay in my lane. That is the part people miss. I was not angry that he did not know who I was. Rank does not entitle you to be recognized. I was something quieter than angry. I was disappointed, the specific way you are disappointed when you watch someone misuse a thing you love. I went to the in-processing office instead. Lieutenant Commander Paige Lindqvist was still there, past shift, the way security managers always are. She was the command security manager, which meant she owned the personnel side of every clearance in the building, and she had the tired, precise manner of a person who has spent a career being the one who says no for good reasons. "Ma'am," she said, standing, "I did not expect you tonight." "I like to see a place before it sees me," I said. "Badge status?" "Tomorrow afternoon at the earliest. The system is slow this week." She paused. "Did you have trouble getting onto the floor?" "No trouble," I said. "The floor is being guarded. That is what it is for." She looked at me a beat longer than the answer needed. Lindqvist was sharp, but she let it go, and I was grateful, because I did not want the first thing the command learned about me to be that I had walked in and gotten a chief in trouble on night one. That is not leadership. That is theater with the other mask on. I took the watch bill and the turnover binder back to my quarters, and I read until the numbers stopped meaning anything. And somewhere in that reading was the thing that mattered, though I did not linger on it, because I had asked for it weeks before and I had expected it to be routine. Before I ever set foot aboard, I had directed a full re-indoctrination and access audit of the command. A new commanding officer can do that. It is not a threat. It is hygiene. You are about to be legally responsible for every secret in the building, and before you sign for that, you want to know that every person read onto it belongs there, that every clearance is current, that every periodic reinvestigation is on schedule, that nothing has gone quietly stale in a drawer. It is the least glamorous thing a commander does, and one of the most important. The audit had started running the day my orders were cut. It did not know Cole's name from anyone's. It did not care that he had a strong jaw and a loud voice and a chief's certainty. It only cared what his file said. I set the folder down. I did not open it against him. Not yet. That night it was still just discipline, not mercy. Mercy came later, and it cost me more than discipline did. I lay in an unfamiliar rack in unfamiliar quarters, and I thought, the way you do it that hour, about the last time this floor had made me feel like nobody. 2004. I was 19. I was a cryptologic technician, brand new, so new my uniform still had the fold lines. I stood the mid-watch on that same deck, and I was the easiest person in the room to talk past. The men did it without malice, mostly. I was young, I was female, I was junior, and the three of those together made me a kind of furniture. I fetched, I logged, I mopped. When I corrected a senior operator once, gently, on a frequency he had transposed, he looked at me the way you look at a chair that has spoken, and then he transposed it again out of spite, and it cost us 4 hours. And then one night, a piece of removable media went missing. You have to understand what that means on a floor like that. A missing piece of classified media is not a lost stapler. It is a security incident that can end careers, trigger investigations, put people in front of very serious rooms. The watch went cold and hard, and the chief on duty, a man whose name I have deliberately let myself forget, looked around for the easiest person to hang it on, and his eyes found the 19-year-old with the fresh fold lines in her uniform. "When did you last have the safe open?" he said. Not a question, a start of a paper trail. I had not touched the safe. I said so. He did not believe me, or he did not care whether he believed me, because belief was not the point. The point was that an incident needs a name, and mine was the cheapest one available. I stood at that console, and I felt the floor tilt under me. I was 19, and I understood, all at once, that being innocent was not going to be enough, that the truth was a small light, and the room was very dark, and nobody with a rank was going to hold my light up for me. Then Senior Chief Ike Ferrand walked onto the floor. Ferrand was the kind of senior chief they do not make in a factory. Gray at the temples, quiet, with hands that had done things. He did not raise his voice, ever, which is why the floor went still when he spoke. He listened to the duty chief for about 90 seconds. Then he walked to the log, walked to the safe, walked to the sign-out sheet, and did in 5 minutes what nobody had bothered to do in an hour. He found the media. It had been signed out correctly by a second class who had gone off shift and locked it in the wrong drawer. A mistake, not a crime, and not mine. Ferrand did not make a speech. He handed the duty chief the sign-out sheet and let him read his own signature at the bottom of the escort line. Then he found me by the coffee mess where I had gone to be invisible. You did not do anything wrong, he said. I know, I said, and my voice cracked on it, which I hated. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, the thing I have carried for 22 years. This deck does not care who you are, he said. It cares whether you tell the truth on it. That is all it has ever cared about. A badge is not a wall you stand behind so you can feel big. It is a trust you carry so other people can sleep. Guard it. Do not hide behind it. Guard it. Do not hide behind it. I have written that sentence in the front of every green logbook I have owned since. I wrote it at 19, and I wrote it at 23 when I pinned on my ensign bars, and I wrote it at 37 when I made commander. Guard it. Do not hide behind it. That is the whole reason Barrett Cole made me feel the way he did in that hatch. He was not wounding me. He was doing the thing Ferran told me never to do. He was hiding behind the trust and calling it guarding. And I already knew, lying in that rack, that the machinery I had set moving weeks before was going to catch him. Not for the hatch, for his own file. And I was going to have to decide what kind of chief I was going to be about it. The kind who found the sign-out sheet, or the kind who looked for the easiest name. I fell asleep before I decided. The floor lets you sleep. It keeps the change. The call came at 11:51 that first night. I was awake for it. I do not sleep well the night before I take a command. Nobody does who is honest about it. My phone lit the ceiling, and it was Lindqvist, and her voice had the flat steadiness that security managers use when they are telling you something they have already checked twice. Ma'am, I am sorry to call this late. The reindoctrination audit generated an automated flag. I need to walk you through it before the morning because it triggers a policy action tonight, and I want you to hear it from me first. Go ahead, I said. I sat up. I turned on the small light. One of the command's chiefs has a lapsed periodic reinvestigation, she said. It went past due 4 months ago. That alone is a problem, but it happens, and normally we would just push a renewal. The issue is that the audit cross-checked his file and found a self-report that was started and never completed. A foreign contact disclosure. He opened it, entered a name, and never finished it. That is not a small gap, ma'am. Under policy, an incomplete disclosure plus a lapsed reinvestigation on someone with his access is an automatic suspension of that access pending review. The system already queued it. It goes into effect at midnight unless a flag officer intervenes, and no flag officer is going to intervene on a records violation this clean. I already knew the name. I did not need to ask. But I asked anyway, because a commander confirms things, she does not assume them. Which chief? Chief Cole, ma'am. Barrett Cole. Access control lead on the mid-watch. I sat with that for a moment. The man in the hatch. The man with the loud certainty. The man who had built his whole standing in that command on being the guardian of the space, and who had let his own file go stale in exactly the way that would strip him of the thing he guarded. There is a temptation in that moment that I want to name honestly, because pretending it was not there would be a lie. The temptation is to feel the universe tilt in your favor, to feel that a scale you did not touch had balanced itself. He humiliated me at 1930. His clearance dies at midnight. It has the shape of a story you would tell at a bar. I did not touch that feeling. I had learned a long time ago that the feeling is a trap. The moment you enjoy a consequence, you start bending toward causing them, and a commander who bends that way is a danger to everyone she leads. Do you want me to hold it until you have assumed command, ma'am? Lindqvist asked. I can flag it for your review in the morning, once you are the accountable official. It would be cleaner on paper if the action carried your authority. No, I said. Ma'am, policy does not wait for me, Commander. Neither should this. If we hold a suspension so that I can be the one to sign it, then we have made a clearance action about a person instead of a policy, and that is the exact disease we are supposed to prevent. Let it run. Document it as automated. When I assume command in the morning, I will inherit it as it stands. I do not want my name on the trigger. I want the regulation on the trigger, because the regulation is what should have caught him, whether I existed or not. There was a short silence on the line. Then Lindqvist said, Understood, ma'am. And there was something in the way she said it, a small warmth under the flatness, that told me she had been testing me a little, the way good security managers test a new commander to see whether I would try to make the machinery serve me. I had passed a test I had not known I was taking. I have thought since that she was the second best thing that command had, and Cole, when he was clean, was the first. At 3 minutes past midnight, on the access board by the hatch, one badge slot went dark. The floor did not know why. That is the part that matters. A man's access can vanish for 100 reasons, and almost all of them are private. The watch saw a dark square where Chief Cole's badge used to light, and they knew only that something had happened, and the not knowing began to move through the deck plates the way it always does, faster than any announcement. I did not pull his clearance. I want that on the record plainly. The system I asked for did, at 11:51 that night, for reasons he had handed it himself, 4 months late and one disclosure short. All I did was refuse to stop it. And refusing to stop it turned out to be the hardest correct thing I did that week. Morning came the way mornings come when you have not slept. Gray, then less gray. I stood in the small head in my quarters and looked at a face that had aged into the job. 41, 23 years. I put on the uniform and I felt the particular weight of the day, which was heavier than a normal change of command, because I was about to stand up in front of a crew and be revealed as the woman one of their chiefs had thrown out of the space 12 hours before. I could feel the trap already, the second trap, the one on the other side. The floor was going to learn that Cole's badge went dark the same night he ejected the incoming commanding officer. Human beings connect dots whether or not the dots are connected. Half that crew was going to believe I had reached out and crushed a chief for embarrassing me, and there was nothing I could say that would fully unmake that belief, because the true story was a records audit that had started weeks earlier, and true stories are always less satisfying than the one where the powerful person takes revenge. I could hide from that. Or I could stand up in the light and let them see the badgeless nobody become their captain, and take the suspicion on the chin and earn my way out of it over months instead of talking my way out of it in a morning. There was never really a choice. Farron had made it for me at 19. Do not hide. Before quarters, I met with Captain Dorian Fenwick, the officer I was relieving. Fenwick was a good man near the end of a good career, and he briefed the turnover with the thoroughness of someone who cared about the place he was leaving. Near the end, he brought up Cole, because of course he had heard. I saw the security action, Fenwick said. Automated flag, lapsed reinvestigation, incomplete disclosure. Clean as it gets. But I will tell you honestly, Corinne, the timing is ugly. Cole is the spine of that watch. The crew leans on him. When they connect the badge to your arrival, and they will, it is going to look like something it is not. I know, sir. He is a hard chief, rough edges, but he is capable, and the mid-watch runs because he runs it. Then the spine has to be clean, sir, I said. A capable man with a stale file is not a strength. He is a liability with a good reputation. That is worse, not better, because everyone trusts the liability. Fenwick looked at me for a moment, and then he nodded, and I saw him decide that the command was in the right hands, which is the only thing a departing captain really wants to know. He threw you off the floor last night, Fenwick said. It was not quite a question. He guarded a space he is paid to guard, I said, loudly, in front of an audience. That is a coaching point, not a crime. It has nothing to do with his clearance, and I will not let anyone pretend it does. You could have told him who you were. I could have, I said. I did not want to win the hatch. I wanted to see the watch. I did not draft only the security endorsement that morning. I drafted 2 things, in my cabin, before quarters, in the last quiet I would have for a while. The first was the endorsement, by the book. The suspension stood, the review would proceed, the process would be scrupulous and documented and fair, and no part of it would carry a whisper of the hatch. The second was a remediation memo, a path, the thing I had been building toward without letting myself name it. Because I knew something about Barrett Cole that his file did not say, and that his loud certainty was designed to hide. A chief does not let his reinvestigation lapse and half open a foreign contact disclosure and abandon it because he is careless. Careless chiefs do not become access control leads. He did it because he was afraid of what the disclosure said, and fear makes people bury paperwork the way it makes them stand too loud in hatches. The bluster and the buried file were the same man. I was almost sure of it. And I knew what it was to be the easiest person to blame and to have one senior person decide to find the truth instead. I knew exactly what that was worth, because Farron had given it to me for free at 19, and it had made my whole career possible. I wanted Cole to have what I had been given. Not a pass, never a pass. due process with dignity, and a road back if he told the whole truth. Being right was cheap. I had been right at 19, and it had still nearly buried me. Right by itself is just a fact standing alone in a dark room. What Ferron did was carry a light over to it. That is leadership. The fact plus the light. I called Robin before I went to quarters. My daughter, 15, and living most of the year with her father, because the deck had taken the evenings and the school plays, and eventually the marriage. She answered on the 4th ring, sleepy, because it was early where she was. "You're actually going to run the place now?" she said. "The whole thing." "The whole thing," I said, "as of about an hour from now." "That's kind of insane, Mom." "It is a little insane," I agreed. "Are you going to be, scary about it?" I thought about the hatch. I thought about the 19-year-old at the coffee mess with a cracked voice. "I am going to try to run it like someone I respected once," I said. "A senior chief. He never raised his voice, and everyone was more afraid of disappointing him than of any man who yelled." "Okay," she said, and then softer. "Okay. Good luck, Captain, I guess." "I will call you tonight," I said, and I meant it, and I even kept it, which had not always been true and was part of the cost I will get to. Then I went to quarters, and the whole crew was there, and Barrett Cole was in the front rank. He looked wrong. Not disheveled. A chief is never disheveled, but hollow around the eyes, a man who had spent 12 hours staring at a dark badge slot and finding no explanation he could stand. He had not connected it to me yet. Why would he? In his version of the previous night, I was a badgeless woman he had correctly turned away and then forgotten. Captain Fenwick read the orders. That is how it is done. There is no drama to it, no music, just an officer reading the legal language that transfers the accountability for a command from one human being to another. I stood beside him and I watched the crew and I watched the exact moment the words arrived. "Is hereby ordered to report as commanding officer." I saw Prewitt first, the second class who had laughed. His face did a thing faces do. It went pale and then very still, as the young man understood that the woman he had laughed at behind his hand was now the person whose name was on the building. Then Cole. He did not gasp. He was too much of a chief for that. But something went out of his posture and something else came into it, and the two things fighting made him look, for 1 second, like a man standing on a deck that had tilted. I knew that tilt. I had felt it at 19 at that same console. There was no cheering. Change of command is not a football game. There was a pressure change in the room, the kind you feel in your ears, as 100 people rearranged, all at once and silently, everything they had assumed about the last 12 hours. I met Cole's eyes. Once. I want to tell you I felt nothing. I felt something. I am not a saint, and this is a true story. But what I felt was not triumph. It was closer to grief, the strange grief of watching a man learn that the wall he built to feel big had a door in it the whole time, and that I had been standing in the doorway. I looked away first, on purpose. A public stare is a lash, and I had no intention of lashing anyone at morning quarters. Whatever happened with Cole was going to happen in an office, on paper, with his dignity intact, not in front of the crew he led. I stepped forward to speak. I kept it short, clipped, the way I talk. "I stood this watch at 19, I said. "On this deck. I know what it asks of you at 0300 when you are tired and the world is asleep and you are the only thing between a secret and the people who want it. I know what it costs. I am not going to pretend I am new to that. I am new to being your captain. I intend to be worthy of the deck. That is all. Carry on." That was it. No speech about the hatch. No name called out. The gap between how I had been seen the night before and who I actually was closed in a single breath. And I refused on purpose to enjoy the closing. Because Ferron was right. The deck does not care who you are. It cares whether you tell the truth on it. And I was about to find out whether Barrett Cole could. The review began that afternoon in the small conference room off the security office, with Lindqvist and a legal advisor and me, and Chief Barrett Cole across the table, looking like a man who had rehearsed a defense for the wrong trial. He came in braced for a fight. You could see it. He had spent the morning, I found out later, telling anyone who would listen that his badge had been pulled by the new captain out of spite, that he had turned her away by the book the night before, and she had crushed him for it. That this was exactly what happens when you enforce standards on the wrong person. He had built himself a story in which he was the last honest man and I was a vindictive officer, and he had walked into that room ready to be a martyr. I did not let him be one. I took the story away from him gently, the way you take a weapon from someone who is holding it wrong and about to hurt himself. "Chief," I said, "before you say anything you have prepared, I am going to tell you what is in front of us, because I think you have the timeline wrong, and the timeline matters." I slid the audit summary across the table. The dates were on it. The audit start date, weeks before my orders were even public. The flag generation, 11:51, before I had spoken to a single soul about him. The automated suspension, 3 minutes past midnight, policy-driven, no human hand. "This audit started running the day my orders were cut," I said. "It did not know your name. I directed a full re-indoctrination of the command before I ever came aboard, because that is what a relieving officer does. The flag on your file is a lapsed periodic reinvestigation, 4 months past due, and an incomplete foreign contact disclosure that you opened and did not finish. Either one is a problem. Together, on someone with your access, they are an automatic suspension. It is in policy. I could not have stopped it without a flag officer intervening, and no flag officer intervenes on a records violation this clean. I did not pull your clearance, Chief. Your file did. I only refused to hold it for a day so I could pretend I had been the one to sign it." He read the dates. I watched him read them. I watched the martyr come apart in his hands, because the martyr needed me to be the villain, and the dates said I had not been in the picture at all when the machinery caught him. "I thought you did this," he said finally. His voice had lost the hatch entirely. "Because of last night, I thought you did this to me." "You did this," I said. 4 months ago, and again the night you opened a disclosure and closed the tab. I only refused to stop it. There is a difference, and I need you to understand the difference. Because your whole defense was built on getting it wrong." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said the thing I had been waiting for, the thing that told me I had read him right in the dark of the night before. "There is a reason I did not finish the disclosure." "I know," I said. "There almost always is. Tell me." And he told me. I am not going to put the details in this story because they were his, and they were painful, and they were the ordinary human kind of complicated that ruins people who are afraid to say them out loud. A family connection overseas, a relative he had not chosen and could not unrelate to, a fear, entirely wrong but entirely understandable, that disclosing it fully would end his career, and so he had done the worst possible thing, which was to open the disclosure honestly and then flinch and leave it half-finished and let his reinvestigation lapse rather than walk into a room and say the sentence out loud. The bluster and the buried file were the same man. I had been almost sure. Now I was sure. He stood too loud in hatches for the same reason he had abandoned a disclosure. He was afraid, and he had built a very convincing wall so that no one, including himself, would see it. "Chief," I said when he was done, "do you know what would have happened if you had finished the disclosure 4 months ago?" "Ended me," he said. "No," I said. "It would have been reviewed. Foreign contacts get disclosed and adjudicated every single day in this Navy. The system is built to hold exactly what you were afraid of. What ends people is not the contact. It is the concealment. You almost ended yourself hiding from a process designed to protect you. You did to your own file the thing you did to me in the hatch. You guarded loudly and you hid at the same time, and you called them the same thing." He looked at me then. Really looked, and I think it was the first time he saw the woman across the table instead of the rank. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "You could just let the review run. You would be within your rights. I threw you off your own floor." "You did," I agreed. "That was a bad night for both of us. Yours is going to be a longer one." I let that sit. Then I told him the truth. "I am telling you this because a long time ago I was the easiest person in a room to blame, and a senior chief decided to find the truth instead of the nearest name. He cleared me, and then he told me that a badge is a trust you carry so other people can sleep, not a wall you hide behind so you can feel big. I have tried to be that senior chief every day since. Today you are the person in the room who is easiest to bury. I am not going to bury you. I am going to run the review by the book, and I am going to hand you the paperwork to restart your reinvestigation and complete your disclosure the right way. And if you tell the whole truth, you have a road. If you lie again, you do not. That part is yours." I slid the second document across the table, the remediation memo, the path. He looked at it for a long time, then he did a thing I did not expect. Barrett Cole, spine of the midwatch, the loudest man in every hatch, put his hand flat on that piece of paper and lowered his head, and his shoulders moved once, and he did not let me see his face for a moment, and I let him have that moment, because a man is allowed to be undone in private, even in a small room. "Take your time, Chief," I said quietly. "There is no audience here. It is just the two of us and a policy." That was the whole difference, and I think he heard it. The night before, he had needed the audience. Now there was none, and neither of us was performing, and the thing got done that never gets done in front of a crowd. There was Prewitt to deal with, too. The second class who had laughed. He came to my cabin the next day, of his own accord, which I noted, because it is easy to laugh in a crowd and hard to walk to the captain's door alone. He stood at attention, and he was young and scared, and he did the right thing. "Ma'am, I laughed last night. When you were. I laughed, and it was wrong, and I wanted to say so to your face." I let him stand in it for a second, not to punish him, just so it would land. "Sit down, petty officer," I said. He sat on the edge of the chair like it might bite him. "Why did you laugh?" "Because the chief did," he said. And then, to his credit, he did not stop there. "Because he was in charge, and I wanted to be on the right side of the person in charge. That is the honest answer, ma'am." "That is the honest answer," I said. "And it is the most dangerous instinct you have. And every good sailor has it, and the entire job is learning to override it. The powerful person in the room is not always right. Sometimes the powerful person in the room is a chief hiding in a hatch. Your loyalty is not to whoever is loudest. It is to the standard, to the deck. Do you understand the difference?" "Starting to, ma'am." "Good. Then last night was worth something." I let him go with that. No paperwork. A correction, not a hammer. Because he was 24, and he had told the truth to my face when he could have avoided my door for 2 years, and a leader who breaks that kind of honesty teaches everyone watching to stop being honest. The command recalibrated over the following weeks in the quiet way commands do. No announcement ever tied the dark badge to the hatch. I made sure of it. When the inevitable rumor reached me that the new captain had crushed a chief for embarrassing her, I did not fight it with a statement, because you cannot outrun a good story with a memo. I fought it the only way that works, which is slowly by being, day after day, a captain who did not crush people, until the story ran out of oxygen because it no longer matched the woman they saw. That is the thing nobody tells you about being wronged in public and vindicated in private. The vindication does not feel like the story you were promised. There is no room full of people gasping in your favor. There is a security review that has to be scrupulous precisely because it would be so easy to make it vengeful. There is a young sailor you have to teach instead of break. There is a chief you have to save from himself when it would be so much simpler to let him drown. The reckoning, when it is done right, is mostly restraint. It is 100 small refusals to enjoy the thing you are allowed to enjoy. Consequence landed on Barrett Cole, but it landed as process, not as vengeance, and the difference between those two is the difference between a command you can trust and one you cannot. That night I did what I had promised Robin I would do. I called her. It was a small thing, and it was not a small thing. For most of her life, the deck had eaten my evenings, not through any single dramatic failure, through 1,000 ordinary ones. A watch that ran long, a deployment that moved, a time zone 8 hours off from her bedtime. The school play I watched on a phone screen in a tent because I could not be in the auditorium. The birthday I called in on a satellite line that dropped twice. None of it was a choice I would have described as choosing her father over her, or the Navy over her, in any single moment. It was the accumulation. The deck gives you purpose and it keeps the change, and it had been keeping my change since I was 19. The marriage had not survived it. I will not pretend the divorce was the deck's fault alone, because 2 people end a marriage, and I was one of the 2, but the op tempo was a named cause. Said out loud in a counselor's office. In the year I made lieutenant commander. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had wanted a partner in the room, and had gotten a voice on a dropped line, and there is only so long a person can be married to a voice on a line. So when I called Robin that night and she picked up on the second ring and said, "So how was day 1 of running the whole thing?" I felt the strange doubled feeling that command gives you. Pride, and under it, the bill. Day 1 had a chief and a hatch, I said, and a badge that went dark, and a young man who laughed and then walked to my door to say he was sorry. That last one sounds like the good part. It was the good part, I said. You would have liked it. He was brave in a small way. Those are the ones that count. We talked for a while, not about anything. About her friends, a class she hated, a movie she wanted me to watch so we could argue about it. Ordinary things. The things the deck had kept the change on for 15 years, handed back to me in a phone call at the end of a hard day. And I understood, sitting there, that this was the actual reckoning. Not the badge, not the hatch, not the moment the crew rearranged at quarters. This, a daughter on the second ring. A voice that had stopped waiting for me and had, somehow, started again. When we hung up, I sat with the quiet. Command has a specific loneliness. It is the loneliness of being the person who cannot be thanked for restraint. I had spent that week doing the hardest correct things I knew how to do, and by design, almost no one would ever know I had done them. The crew would remember that a chief lost his badge the night the new captain arrived. They would not remember that the captain refused to hold the action so she could sign it, refused to make it about the hatch, refused to enjoy it, handed the man a road back and taught a young sailor instead of breaking him. Restraint is invisible. That is what makes it restraint. If people applaud it, it becomes performance. And the moment it becomes performance, it stops being the thing that holds a command together. I took out the green logbook I had carried for years, the one with Ferran's sentence written inside the front cover in my own 19-year-old handwriting. Faded now. Guard it. Do not hide behind it. I had spent my whole career guarding. That part I had never struggled with. The floor was sacred to me, the way it had been sacred to Ferran, and I had defended it in rooms and on nights I am not allowed to describe. The guarding was easy. It was the do not hide behind it that was hard. Because a badge, a rank, a clearance, they are so easy to stand behind. They will make you feel big every day of your life if you let them. Barrett Cole had let them, and it had nearly cost him everything. And the terrible thing is that I understood the temptation completely, because there had been nights when I wanted to hide behind mine too. The night in the hatch, for instance. I could have hidden behind the commander's rank and flattened him. It would have felt wonderful for about 4 seconds. Instead, I had said, understood, chief, and walked away, and let the truth read my name back to the room in its own time, in the morning, at quarters, without my hand on it. That is the thing I had finally done in one day. I had guarded the deck, and I had not hidden behind the badge, both at once. For the first time, at 41, 22 years after a senior chief told me to. It had taken me that long. Some lessons you do not finish learning until you are the one holding the door. Earned peace is not the same as happiness. I want to be honest about that too. There was grief in that quiet cabin, grief for the marriage, grief for the evenings, grief, even, a little, for the loud man in the hatch who was going to spend months restarting a reinvestigation and completing a disclosure, and living with the fact that he had thrown his own captain off the floor, and who did not deserve to be destroyed for being afraid and would carry it anyway. Being right had not made me whole. It had never once made me whole. It had only ever made me right, which is a colder and smaller thing than the movies promise. But there was peace under the grief, the specific peace of having paid the price and not flinched. I had walked onto that floor a badgeless nobody and been thrown out, and I had not become smaller to prove I was not nobody. I had just kept standing where the truth was and let it do its slow work. And it had. The weeks turned. The command settled around me the way commands do around a captain the crew has decided to trust, which is slowly, and then all at once, and mostly without anyone saying so. Barrett Cole completed his disclosure. The whole thing this time, the real names. The fear said out loud in a room instead of buried in a tab. He restarted his periodic reinvestigation. He sat across from adjudicators and answered questions he had spent 4 months too frightened to answer, and the process did exactly what I had told him it would do, which is hold what he was afraid of and weigh it fairly. His access was provisionally restored, under review with conditions. Not a pass. Never a pass. A road, walked correctly. The first night he stood the mid-watch again, with his badge-lit green on the board once more, I happened to be on the floor. Not to check on him. To be on my floor at 0300, which is a thing I did and will always do, because a captain who never stands the mid-watch does not really command the mid-watch. He saw me come through the hatch, the same hatch, and for a second the whole thing hung in the air between us, all of it. The loud dismissal and the dark badge and the small room where he had put his hand flat on a piece of paper and lowered his head. He came to a version of attention that was quieter than his old one, and he said, "Permission to run your floor right, Captain?" Not permission to enter, not a badge check, permission to run your floor right. He had heard the whole lesson. "Granted, Chief," I said. And I meant it, and he knew I meant it, and we never spoke of the hatch again because we did not need to. The floor had read us both back to ourselves. It cares whether you tell the truth on it. We both, finally, had. I took leave that month. Real leave, the kind I had skipped for years, telling myself the command could not run without me, which is the lie every ambitious officer tells, and every good one eventually stops believing. I made the drive to where Robin lived. Hours of highway and bad coffee and a playlist she had made me promise to listen to. I showed up at a door I had shown up at too rarely, and my daughter, 15 and pretending not to care, hugged me harder than a 15-year-old is supposed to admit she wants to. We did nothing important for 4 days. We argued about the movie. She beat me at a card game and gloated. We ate food that was bad for us. I was not a captain for 4 days. I was just her mother, home, present, in the room, instead of on a line. And I understood that this, too, was part of not hiding behind the badge. You can hide behind a command as easily as behind a rank. The building will always need you. There is always a reason to stay. And a person who hides in her own command until there is nothing left of her to bring home has guarded the deck and lost the reason the deck exists, which is so that somewhere, someone she loves can sleep. When I drove back, I stopped hiding from that too. There was one more thing I did that season that I need to tell you about, because it closes the circle and because it is the part I am most glad I did not put off. I found Ike Ferron. I had lost track of him the way you lose track of the people who shaped you, through moves and deployments and the ordinary drift of a Navy career. But a senior chief who mattered that much is not hard to find if you actually try, and I finally tried. He had retired years before. He was living inland, far from any coast, in the way old sailors sometimes choose to, as if they need distance from the thing that owned them. I wrote him a letter first because a man like that deserves a letter and not a text, and then I called. His voice was older, but it was the same voice, the one that had gone quiet and made a whole watch floor go quiet with it. "Vale," he said when I told him who I was. "The mop girl, with the fold lines in her uniform." "Commander now senior chief," I said. "Commanding officer, actually, of the same floor, the one where you cleared me." There was a silence on the line, and then he laughed, low and pleased, the laugh of an old man hearing that a seed he planted had become a tree he would never sit under. "Tell me," he said. So I told him. The hatch, the badge, the audit that caught a frightened chief, the small room where I had handed a loud man a road instead of a hole. And when I got to the part where I had said the thing, his thing, a badge is a trust you carry so other people can sleep, not a wall you hide behind so you can feel big. He was quiet for a long moment. "You kept it," he said finally. "I wrote it in the front of every logbook I have owned since I was 19, I said. I read it the night before I took command. I have been trying to be you for 22 years, Senior Chief. I finally managed it for about 1 whole day. 1 whole day is more than most people manage," he said. "You held a door open for a man who slammed one on you. That is the entire job, Vale. That is the only part of it that ever mattered. The secrets are important, but any competent person can guard a secret. Holding the door open for the person who wronged you, that is the rare thing. That is the thing they cannot teach in a school. You either have it, or you spend your whole career hiding behind a badge pretending you do." We talked for an hour. He asked about the floor, about whether they still ran the mid-watch the old way, about the coffee mess where he had found me with a cracked voice. He was proud, and he let me hear it, which is a gift an old chief does not have to give, and gave anyway. He passed the following winter. I got the call from a number I did not know, a nephew going down a list Ferron had left, and my name was on it, which undid me more than I expected in the parking lot where I took the call. I flew inland for the service. I stood in a small room, far from any ocean, in my dress blues, among people who had known the retired grandfather and not the senior chief, and when it was my turn, I told them what he had done for a frightened 19-year-old on a watch floor they were not cleared to imagine. I told them he had taught me that a badge is a trust and not a wall, and I rendered him the last salute I had, the one you give the standard a person served, not just the person, and I held it a beat longer than the manual calls for. Because the manual has never met Ike Ferrand. Barrett Cole is still on my floor. He is, in fact, exactly what Fenwick promised he was, the spine of that watch, except that now he is a clean spine, a chief whose file is current and whose disclosures are complete and whose loudness has quieted into something more useful. He mentors the young ones differently now. I have watched him do it. I watched him once find a scared junior sailor being set up as the easiest name for a missing log entry, and I watched him walk to the sign-out sheet and find the real answer in 5 minutes and hand the duty section their own signature and clear the kid, and then find the kid at the coffee mess afterward and say something quiet I could not hear. I did not need to hear it. I knew the shape of it. It was being handed down, the way it was handed to me, the way I handed it to him in a small room when it would have been so much easier to let him drown. Prewitt made first class. He's going to be a chief himself one day, and I think he's going to be a good one because he learned early and in his own body the most important lesson there is, which is that the loudest person in the room is not always the one you should stand behind. He learned it the hard way, laughing at a captain he did not recognize. Those are the lessons that stick, the ones that cost you a little shame. I have never once regretted letting him keep his career and take the lesson instead. Shame teaches, destruction only removes. I think about that distinction more than almost anything else in this job. It is the whole difference between a leader and a person with power. A person with power removes what embarrasses them. A leader asks what a mistake is trying to teach and to whom and whether the person who made it can be built rather than discarded. Removal is fast and it feels like strength, and it is almost always the lazy choice. Building is slow and it looks like weakness, and it is almost always the hard, correct one. I have discarded people in my career. I am not going to pretend I have a clean record on that. But I have never once discarded someone and felt, a year later, that I had chosen well. The ones I built are the ones I am proud of. Prewitt is one. Cole, in the end, is another. Neither of them would have taught me anything if I had simply removed them, and a leader who stops being taught by her own command has already begun to fail it. There was a reckoning above me, too, and I should tell you about it because it is the part where the whole thing could have gone the other way, and where I found out what I was actually made of. About a month in, a senior officer from higher up the chain came down to ask about the optics. Not the substance, the optics. He was not a bad man either. He was a careful man in a careful job, and careful men worry about how things look. He sat in my office, and he said what a lot of people had been thinking. "Corinne, the timing on the Cole action is a problem," he said. "A chief loses his access the same night he turns away the incoming captain. You and I know the audit predates you. The paper is clean, but the crew does not read audit dates. The crew reads a story. And the story is that you crushed a man for embarrassing you. I'm not saying you did. I am saying it looks like you did, and looking like it is its own kind of cost. It might have been smarter to hold the action. Let it land a few weeks later, once the two events were not sitting on top of each other. Cleaner optically. Nobody would have questioned it. I understood what he was offering. He was offering me an easier month. He was offering me a version of events where I had massaged the timing to protect my own image, and he was right that it would have worked, and that is exactly why I could not do it. "Sir," I said, "if I had held that suspension for 3 weeks to make my arrival look better, I would have done the precise thing this whole command exists to prevent. I would have made a clearance action serve a person. Mine. I would have taught every sailor watching that the rules bend around timing and image if you are senior enough to bend them. That is a more dangerous lesson than a bad month of gossip. The gossip costs me. The lesson would cost the command for years. I will take the month, sir. I have taken worse, for less." He looked at me for a while. Then he did a thing I respected. He stopped arguing the optics because he had heard the substance under them, and he said, "All right. For what it is worth, I think you are right. I just needed to hear you say it out loud." And he went back up the chain, and I never heard about the optics again, and I think, though he never said so, that he told the people above him that the command was in good hands. That is how it works up there. Quietly. In sentences nobody writes down. That was the moment I could have hidden behind the badge in the other direction, not to flatten a chief, to protect my own image, which is the more seductive hiding place because it dresses up as prudence. The badge will offer you that hiding place your whole career. It will always give you a reason to do the thing that looks good instead of the thing that is right, and it will call the difference judgment. I had spent 22 years learning to tell the two apart, and I finally could, in an office, with an easier month sitting right there on the table, unchosen. Lindqvist and I built something out of that season. She had tested me on night 1, holding out the offer to make the machinery serve me, and I had passed without knowing it was a test. And after that, she trusted me the way a good security manager trusts a commander, which is completely and never blindly. She would tell me no to my face when I was wrong, in front of no one, which is the most valuable thing a subordinate can do, and the rarest. A command where the security manager is afraid to tell the captain no is a command with a slow leak in it. Ours did not leak. I made sure she never paid a price for the word no, and so she never stopped saying it, and so I never got to be wrong for long. That is not a small thing. That is most of what keeps a place honest. The command passed its next full security inspection without a single major finding. The inspectors remarked on the culture, which is a strange thing to inspect and the only thing that actually matters. They said the watch floor had a discipline about the truth. They did not know they were describing a sentence written in the front of my logbook in the handwriting of a 19-year-old. They did not know they were describing Ike Ferran, 3 decades on, still teaching a floor he had left long ago through a captain he had cleared at a coffee mess. The best things a person builds outlive their own name. Ferran's name is not on that inspection report. His fingerprints are all over it. The floor runs. At 0300, when the world is asleep, there are people on that deck who are the only thing between a secret and the people who want it, and most of them will never be thanked, and none of them will ever be famous. And that is the job. That has always been the job. I stood it at 19 with fold lines in my uniform, and I stand it now with a captain's insignia, and honestly, the deck cannot tell the difference and does not care. It cares whether you tell the truth on it. That is all it has ever cared about. I still have the visitor pass from that first night. I do not know why I kept it. A cheap laminated rectangle on a frayed lanyard, the thing that made me a nobody in a hatch for one evening. It sits in the drawer of my desk, and sometimes, on a hard night, I take it out and look at it, and I remember standing in a passageway with a sealed hatch behind me and a folder under my arm, choosing not to become smaller. I could have become smaller. That is what the hatch was inviting me to do. Shrink, argue, plead, or flatten him with a rank and feel big for 4 seconds. Every version of smaller was on offer. I did not take any of them. I kept standing where the truth was, and I let the truth do its slow, unglamorous, undramatic work, and in its own time it read my name back to the room. So here is the thing I know now that I did not know in that hatch, and it is the only thing I really came here to say. If someone with a little authority decides that you are nobody, you do not have to become smaller to prove them wrong. You do not have to argue with the wall. You do not have to win the hatch. The truth of who you are is not something you have to shout across a room at a man who has already made up his mind. Keep standing where the truth is. Keep telling it on whatever deck you are given. It has a way of reading your name back to the room in its own time, without your hand on the trigger, and it is always more convincing when it arrives on its own than when you drag it in by the collar. And if the day comes when you are the one with the authority, and someone who wronged you is suddenly the easiest person in your room to bury, remember that the whole measure of you is in that moment, not in how loudly you can guard the door, in whether you can hold it open for the person who slammed it on you. Anyone can guard. Guarding is the easy half. The rare thing, the thing they cannot teach you in any school, is to carry the light over to the frightened person and not the loud one. To hand a man a road when you have every right to hand him a hole. A badge is not a wall you hide behind so you can feel big. It is a trust you carry so other people can sleep. Guard it, do not hide behind it. And when it is your turn to hold the door, hold it open. That is the last salute, not the one you give the person who doubted you. The one you give the standard you serve long after the doubt has been forgotten, At 0300, when no one is watching and the world is asleep and you are the only one who will ever know you got it right.